Stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Bush. Dunn.
Here.
Eisner.
Here.
Janetka. Here. Skelding. Here. Steffes. Here. Sullivan. Here.
Next, we'll go to recognitions.
So. Got in. Our FFA group continue to have a great deal of success. Congratulations to outstanding FFA, Interpoint FFA chapter. Morgan Vonder will receive her American degree at the National FFA Convention in October. You were made aware of the state championship livestock judging group. At a previous meeting, Daniel Nordstrom was a state champion in turf grass management proficiency. Daniel sends his application now onto the national level. State proficiency finalists Carson Kroll, Daniel Nordstrom, and Joy Robinson. Rita Wilson, top 10 in the state in extemporaneous speaking, and Hannah Smith received her FFA degree as a recipient here. So different images from different groups here. So again, very successful program, certainly worthy of a round of applause. I see Officer Ottaway is here. I'll turn the floor over to Officer Ottaway to speak about the track team this year.
All right. We had a great season this year. We had 30 kids. We had 5 students from 4 other schools that shot with us. We had state trap on June 12th. As a team, there was 1,000 kids shot on Saturday and then 1,000 on Sunday. So 2,000 kids at our state tournament. We came in second as a team, but we brought home our first individual state champion, Brody Lee, which he is out in Michigan right now at Nationals. So we have a few of the trap members out there. I tried printing off the day of the trap shoot. It was live scoring, so we had everything, and then after live scoring, it disappeared. So I can't tell you how, but we had several kids ranked really high, and they rank as novice, junior varsity, and varsity. And Brody got first in the varsity. So we had a great season. Had a lot of fun with the kids. The hardest part was trying to find ammo. It was very short in supply, so we didn't get a lot of extra shooting, a lot of extra practice in, but we can't do it without the help of the other coaches and the parents and the support of the school. So we had a great year.
So congratulations. Perfect timing, Coach. Our state golf team and Coach Soko.
All right. We have some of the members here tonight. 4 of the guys, all the young ones, go figure. So I think that's it. All right, it's my 12th season of coaching golf, hard to believe. Starting to feel old. That's why the gray hairs are starting to kick in, but I think that we're definitely proving that we're going in the right direction. Great showing here by the young kids tonight just shows what's coming up for us. You know, we were able to make it to the state tournament this year. We got 3rd place. And I think if we just would have a little more experience, I think we definitely could have finished a little higher. We had a nice article in the paper. Levi Zimmerman's been giving us a lot of good pub. But I didn't really know all of the accolades that were going on over the last couple of years until he kind of put it in there and we look back on it. I think this was our 6th straight conference title, 5th straight regional title, 2 sectional titles in the last 5 years. So we're definitely going in the right direction. So our participants this year were Alex Ross, Spencer Workman, Matt Busser, those were our freshmen. Then Brock Ellenson and Carson Kroll were our sophomores. And our junior were Hayden Marr and Ollie Mitchell. And then our only senior was Chandler Workman. So like I said, we're pretty young, and that's definitely a good thing for us. Numbers not as high, but I think Mineral Plains baseball team's kind of been, throwing a wrench into that, but in a good way. Obviously, it's great to see them successful. But I think that, our community and our athletic program as a whole, showing these kids how to be successful and everything that they do all year long is what trickles on down to each sport individually. So, I couldn't be more proud to represent this school district, and I'm looking forward to a lot more successful years to come. So I just want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to do it. So
Congratulations. Sure, we have anybody from the track program here with us tonight, but again, as part of our co-op, the Dodge Point track team sent many people off the state. 7th place, so trying to get through here. 7th place in the 4x4, Matthew Nordstrom, Charlie Keith, Will Orrit, Owen McDonald, with Zach Bispak and Drew Hotstein as alternates. 10th place in the 1600, Will Orrit. 10th place in the 200, Blair Waters. 13th place in the 4x8, Julia Thompson, Haley Kearns, Emily Cody, Reagan Schutte, Grace Wersall, and Zoe Dampf. 15th place in the 4x100, Emma Steffes, Ashley Baumgartner, Belle Waters, Blair Waters, Kira Halverson, and Malia Ashman were alternates. 16th place in the 4x200, Kira Halverson, Ashley Baumgartner, Belle Waters, Blair Waters, alternates Emma Steffes and Emily Cody. So again, both boys and girls programs making it to state with several different entrants. And again, a great and successful spring season. So congratulations to the Dodge Point track kids. And one last note, volleyball team, the Mineral Point volleyball team earns academic all-state honors. Volleyball is always a fall sport, but with this crazy season, they split it. So some schools played in the fall, other schools played in the spring. So they did not recognize anything until after the spring season was complete. And in essence, instead of a semester GPA, girls, this was a year-long GPA. So big congratulations to the 2020-21 girls volleyball team. Criteria to achieve all academic award is to have a team GPA of a 3.4. Mineral Point girls crushed it with a 3.82 average team GPA. Individual criteria is usually for a semester. This was a year-long above a 3.5. So our girls volleyball team, every member of the varsity volleyball team, their GPA counts towards this, much like I shared with the boys basketball team a couple meetings ago. It's everybody that's a part of the varsity program, and their cumulative GPA for the varsity team was a 3.82. So congratulations to the girls volleyball team on earning this prestigious academic/athletic award. That's all I have at this time for recognitions.
Okay. Next, I have approval of minutes. We had the regular meeting on June 14th. We had a finance committee meeting 6:29, and then a special meeting 6:30. And then we had the elementary tour, which had no action taken. I would take a motion to approve them all and entirely, unless someone wants to approve them individually.
Make a motion to approve all three.
Okay.
I will second.
Yeah, Janetka Heisner.
Yep.
Page. One question. Well, any discussion about the minutes or?
None here.
Okay.
Okay, Janetka,
Yes.
Eisner,
Yes.
Skelding,
Yes.
Steffes,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Gunn.
Yes. Okay, next communications, any board communications received?
I think we all received an email earlier today, from an elementary school parent, concerned about COVID protocols for the fall, hoping that at least for the elementary school, we would follow CDC guidelines, and require masks, possibly beyond the elementary school. Her imminent concern was
That's scary. Good.
received the same letter.
Jody, anything in addition?
So the same that Bob received, and then also a note regarding regarding our COVID protocols, and specifically quarantine and where we're getting that direction from going forward.
So a couple of things, Doc. I see there's no closed session on the agenda, and for some reason, can we still move into closed session after the meeting?
I don't think so.
If there's a concern,
I don't think so. Can we address it offline?
well, certainly I can't address it during open session.
Right.
Because it is employee specific.
Can you relay the concern to Mitch?
I can. We had a standing closed session item on the agenda every month. I'm just wondering if that changed.
It did change because we were, as my understanding, go ahead, Mitch, we were instructed that we couldn't do that.
You cannot just carry a closed session agenda item without a specific purpose for going to closed session prior to the meeting. It just can't be a placeholder on the agenda just in case.
Okay. So it has to be listed on the agenda to go into closed session.
Yes.
So I apologize you didn't know that, Larry, but just for the board's sake, if anyone wants to, before the board meeting, if anyone has an issue that thinks it should be discussed in closed session, please let me and Mitch know and we can make sure it's on the agenda.
And is there a minimum amount of time? Is it at any point before we call the session to order, or is it subject to publication guidelines? Just asking for clarification.
It can be amended, the agenda can be amended prior to the meeting, but it needs at least 24 hours prior to the meeting.
Okay.
It's published in the paper, but because things can happen between us having to send the agenda on Tuesday, the week prior, and the meeting, I have received advice from Bob Butler that it is possible to bend your agenda
Up to 24 hours
up to
before the meeting.
24 hours prior.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we're aware of that. So,
Okay.
moving on from that, in the past, we have had the citizen communications during the agenda portion of the meeting, along with what you'll ask the citizens the other day to say. I encouraged it and I liked it and I supported it. I know it has to be managed, otherwise meetings can go on for a very long time, but it could be up to the board president's discretion, to cut off discussion from the citizens. And the problem I have with it is, sure, the agenda is printed, but with discussion from the school board, administration, anybody that's allowed to participate in the discussion might spur other discussion from people that could add to the discussion. And I'll always say some of the best information I get is from people that I don't agree with. But I like to hear it all. I don't know if it's up to the board or if it's up to the board president to make that call. I don't know, but something to consider moving forward.
Yes. I mean, I did a little bit of just like WASP review of citizen communications, and I think in the end, the board can decide whatever the board wants to do, and then the president kind of takes the board's wishes and just kind of it manages it, right? So, I mean, the way we currently have the meetings agenda set up is we do all communications first. And then the only additional communication that we add is like for expert input, like if we wanted to talk to an administrator. But I think we can, if we have like a big issue that we need to kind of wrap our minds around, and maybe there's a lot of citizen communication, we can decide to, any citizens that want to share their communication on that issue, we can move all of that communication to that point on the agenda.
Yeah, of course, it has to be specific to what's on the agenda.
Right, but I think we would still treat it the same, meaning we would allow the citizen comment for the 3 minutes,
Right.
and then that's it, rather than having a back and forth, kind of conversation or debate, because that can digress quickly.
Well,
Right.
we don't need to hear the same thing 10 times. I completely understand.
Right,
But if there's something that could add to the discussion and help us make a better, more informed decision, we're all here because of that.
that's right. So, I mean, I think definitely encouraging public input in all forms, including during open meeting, is something we've always been doing. And the question is, how do we organize it and contain it? And right now we have it, kind of before the agenda starts, so we hear the communication, and then, but if during a meeting we anticipate a lot of citizens communicating one issue, we can decide to say, let's allow that issue, let's defer those citizen comments to that issue, and then we would let them communicate during that spot. So we could do that. The other thing I've noticed some districts do is, if it's a really big issue, we just hold a public hearing where it's a special meeting
Right.
specifically for that issue, where we have a kind of feedback, kind of like we did with the referendum in the cafeteria,
You could try it, and if it doesn't work, we could always go back. And I think it's worth a try. But that's my opinion.
Sure,
Of course, it's your decision and the board's decision.
sure.
To move in that direction. A couple more things. Had a parent reach out to me. Oh, I got the same email you referenced, Bob. Had a parent reach out to me. There was a social media post by a person affiliated with the school pushing for vaccinations. And I want to really emphasize this, that the school needs to be very neutral on that. Both ways. We could get into more of that in the COVID protocol agenda portion. Agenda item. Another email from a parent. The school should not segregate students based upon vaccination status. That includes extracurricular. That could really turn into something that we don't want to get to. So that should spur a lot of discussion.
Mhm.
Everything else is on the agenda. So that's all right.
Okay, thanks.
Nothing over and above what Bob brought up.
Okay. I had a couple additional concerns about what we're going to do for COVID mitigation for this year. So more just questions than comments. So I'm glad we're going to be talking about it. Okay, I think that's it for work communications. And then Mitch, do we have anybody signed up? Okay, I've got 2 people signed up for talk about the COVID protocols. Is anyone, are you thinking, Larry, that we should have the communication during that part of the agenda? Or are you just talking just broadly?
I'm talking broadly.
Okay,
Yeah, no, not about this specific, but broadly.
okay. All right, well, I'm cool with letting them talk right now. So first I have, okay, so just remember, if you could please stand up and please state your name and where you live, and just make sure you're kind of in the general central space so that the camera can see you, because we're recording it, people are online. And then you got 3 minutes. Okay, Krista Lumens.
Hi, I'm Krista Lumens, and I'm a parent of a second and third grader at Mineral Point Elementary School. And I apologize, I have to read this because I'm too nervous to speak to you all. First, I'd like to point out that we were one of the district's virtual families this year, and I wanted to thank all of you who worked hard to make the virtual option continue through the year. And Matt Renwick and Nikki Uppena and all the teachers who worked with us did such an outstanding job communicating and making virtual learning robust and effective. I appreciate that very much. I would, however, like my children to get back to in-person learning. So tonight I'm here to urge you to adopt a mask requirement for all unvaccinated children and those who work with them per the CDC's recent guidance for reopening schools. My kids rarely complain about wearing a mask. The only people I've heard complain about children having to wear masks have been adults. So let's remember that they don't mind and the mask is temporary and it works. It's proven itself as an effective method to prevent transmission. I'm sure you've all read the additional guidance from the CDC. It recommends a layered approach to reopening schools, and we should be following those recommendations. And I know other parents and I've spoken with other teachers who feel the same. Besides vaccinations, wherever possible, and a mask requirement, everyone should be maintaining a social distance of 3 feet, and schools should increase ventilation and be diligent about hand washing. I know the reason that they're in layers is because we can't do everything perfectly all the time. So we catch ourselves where we miss other spots. I realize that many feel that children won't get sick from COVID, and while it is well known that symptoms are generally mild in children, they can become sick. I don't understand why, when we work to prevent transmission last year, I think there were no confirmed cases of transmission at school, why we would not continue that method until our children have the opportunity to be vaccinated. Serious illness is rare, but shouldn't even one hospitalization be prevented if we know how to do it? In addition, we still don't know enough about post-COVID conditions in children to let it run rampant amongst them. I would like to be able to send my children to school and feel confident that they're being protected. It should also be a priority that our community protects its most vulnerable and that we do our part to stop spread and mutations. The mask is a simple tool. We all know how to use it, and please require it in the school. Thank you.
Okay, next I have Christy Cole.
Hi, not everyone. Krista is, but my name is Christy Cole. My daughter is Cleo, and she's going into first grade this year. And I also would like to thank you all on the school board for making hard choices last year. And I mean, the staff and the teachers and the administration were fabulous in getting our kids through a really hard year last year. Cleo did virtual kindergarten, and like when people would be like, "Oh, how's that going?" Like expecting it to be terrible. I got to say fabulous. And I know you all can't comment on individual teacher performance, but Brooke McGraw is amazing and did an incredible job with the kids, like unbelievable. And I think out of respect to them, I'm also here because I would like to say that I think we should mask in schools in the fall. I echo a lot of what Krista said about the unknowns of COVID, about protecting immunocompromised, protecting pregnant women and unborn children, protecting people who, for whatever reason, the vaccine doesn't work for them or are unable to be vaccinated. So I would like the board to follow recommendations and not have masking for people in schools to keep everyone safe. I also just feel like out of respect for our teachers' time and energy and student time and energy, we would like to minimize disruptions in school this year. That was one of the reasons why we kept our daughter in virtual throughout the whole year, even though the school obviously did a great job with the layered protections, keeping them safe. We would like her to be in virtual. We don't want disruptions for her, like that's hard for her learning style. And we don't want to ask more of our teachers than we need to ask of them because they really pulled us through last year. So I think masking would solve a lot of those issues. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say on that. I do, just what you were just talking about though, about the citizen communications. It would be nice if it felt like the communications that you got from parents outside of meetings, like as someone who has a hard time coming to meetings because I do have a young child, it would be nice to figure out some way to formalize those, because it doesn't always feel like your voice is heard. If someone just says, oh, like I got an email from a parent about this, like maybe have those read or something. Because even though if you think your job isn't to hear the same thing 10 times, like it actually is. Like pick a format for sharing that, and maybe like formalize that so that those voices can be heard as well. And also, not use it to like hide your own opinion behind. So anyway, that's what I have. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being here and making the choices for school.
I'll just say I can't guarantee that every email the board gets will be read in open meeting. We can discuss or doing that. There's sometimes we get like 30, 50 plus.
And I totally get that. But they're also sometimes it's like, you know, people are like, a friend told me, and you're like, hey. I mean, it just would be nice to like actually hear what people have to say.
I think we can talk about that, but I think in the short term, if you can't attend and you want your comments read in open meeting, send them to me as the board president, and I will read them aloud.
Okay, that might be a nice.
If you want it specified to be read in open meeting, I can do that. Yes.
I think that would be a nice, just a nice general statement that if you ever are sharing a communication that you feel strongly about having read, because I feel like the nature of a lot of the emails that I receive, people would probably prefer that they not be read verbatim, but maybe share as general sentiment shared. But if somebody does want something read or shared publicly, to please be very clear about specifying that, because I wouldn't ever want to make that assumption on someone's behalf.
We're opening up a can of worms if we start paying attention.
That's right. Right.
I agree.
We don't want to do that.
But do you think it's appropriate if someone
Requested.
requested?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I've done that before.
Yeah.
Not very often, but I have done it before.
Totally.
I just want to clarify, when I said we don't want to hear the same thing 10 times, if we're an hour and a half into the meeting and we allow citizen communication during the agenda portion of the meeting to delay the meeting, that's what I meant by that. During this time, we could hear the same thing 100 times. I don't care.
Thanks. Okay, that is all who signed up. So if anyone present wants to speak, yes, sir. Go ahead and just state your name and residence.
My name is Bob Mann from here, just south of town. I don't have any kids in the school system anymore. And I don't know of anyone that would ever dispute me that we've got an awesome school district. We've got awesome teachers. I've never had any complaints. My kids are gone now. But at any rate, I came for the reason of figured mask maybe was going to come up tonight, and even more concerning to me is the vaccination part of it. You know, you mentioned about, I think, Larry. Thanks to the school board for letting us be involved here. If I heard you correctly, am I hearing it the greatest? You were talking about not separating vaccinates from non-vaccinates, correct?
You're exactly right.
Okay. And please don't take this as anything that sounds threatening, but you're gonna be in some deep water if you start requiring. You have no right to require anyone to take a vaccination shot. You're elected by the people. You have nor would I. I don't believe in masks, but I'm not a mask shamer. If you wear one, I'm cool with that. But you're not going to mask shame me either. I would, in all due respect for the women that talked, I would tell you that I asked the question many times this summer. I have a lot of kids come through my place at the business center. A lot of kids, not even from this district, but I asked them what they thought of the mask, and they said they hated it. Now, the comment was made by this lady, and I respect your comments and believe your comments, but she said it's mainly from adults. These weren't adults. And I would guess, and this isn't, I don't mean this to come across as negative, but I would guess you will lose some enrollment if that's, I don't know that for a fact. My bigger concern though is the vaccines. My daughter, I was driving all day today, so I couldn't, I'm not supposed to text and drive or look at stuff when you're driving. Sometimes I cheat a little, but today I didn't. April 2021, one of the women quoted the CDC, their new requirements. April 2021, more than 1,000 reports. These are young adolescent and young adults that were treated with the vaccine. Over 1,000 reports of inflamed heart, particularly in adolescents and young adults. this vaccine is an experimental vaccine. Nobody can dispute that in this room. This has not been tried on animals. We do not know the long-term effect. So to start talking about if your kid ain't vaccinated, you better be wearing a mask. No one in this room has the right to tell somebody that's a parent's decision. That's not the school board's decision or anyone else or mine. I'll decide for my kids. Of course, my kids are of age now, they can decide for themselves. But you're gonna, I think, run into something very serious if you make the requirement to come to Middle Point District, school district, you got to be vaccinated at some point. And to me, the mask thing is going to be the preliminary of, because we've already discussed, can't separate them from vaccinates to non-vaccinates. I don't think you want to go down that road where we start to.
Just wrap up your sentence. Time's
Oh,
up.
okay. Anyway, I think you better be very cautious of anything requiring a vaccine. One last thing, if I might. Our president was on the podium in the last week stating that they were fixing to come door to door. That's not a very good idea. And I don't think our school district needs to start even, and I know maybe you're not talking about it, but this could be the preliminary to that.
Thank you. Go ahead and say your name and,
Okay, where do you want me to stand here?
you're fine right there, yeah.
Okay. Well, my name's Teresa Orsburn, and I just had a daughter graduate this last year, so I've been through the COVID thing with school and everything. But I'm also a school bus driver, so this is a little different. And not in this district, in another district nearby. And as a school bus driver, you see things on the bus all the time. And if you think you're gonna save your kids by making them wear a mask, believe me, it isn't working, because the bus driver has a big mirror. We can see everything that goes on back there. And of course, I can't be looking backwards constantly and saying, pull up your mask, or even put on your mask, because our seats are really high. The kids are short. You don't know what they're doing back there. And sometimes they'll peek their head out and they'll have it off, and I tell them to put it back on. So I'm just saying, sure, the mask may have helped, but if they ride a bus, forget it. And another thing, I have a daughter that was here, and she has asthma, and she had a hard time with the mask. She really did, but she did the best she could to keep it on. And I just want to say we got to think about that too. That's a important issue. So thanks for letting me get up here.
Thank you for coming.
Sure.
Anybody else want to say a few words? Okay, anyone online, you can use the raise your hand icon and we'll call on you. Going once, going twice. I'm not seeing. Okay. Great. Okay. Let me get back to my agenda here. Okay. Now we'll go to items for information and discussion. First is the elementary building update from HSR.
Thanks for having us tonight to talk a little bit more about the elementary school progress. Hopefully you had a chance to see the facility last couple weeks ago. It was beneficial to really walk around there and see it firsthand. We're definitely in the home stretch here. So we're month 16 out of 18, so about 89% complete. The progress being focused on right now is really the existing portions of the building renovation itself. The demolition is primarily complete. There's still a little selective demolition in a couple areas. New openings are being cut in. You can start to see some of the circulation patterns that we've been talking about with the circular loop around really both levels, and really starting to put it back together. The concrete floor on the first level got put back in, and they're starting to really put in finishes. So the painting is going on now, and they're starting to put in a lot of the finish items there. A lot of that mechanical electrical plumbing, our rough-ins are complete as well, and things are progressing nicely. I'll go over a few pictures here because usually pictures can describe it better than I ever can. So the flooring in the main street got installed. That looks really nice and does tie in. A lot of the same finishes that are in the building addition are also being tied into the renovation portions. So the goal is that as the renovation portions really are completed, that they'll tie in together nicely and make a good transition. You can start to see some of the behind the scenes, what's going on in the building renovation. I'd be hard pressed to really notice some of these rooms. So a lot of the rooms are getting a fresh upgrade, including a new spray foam being added on the exterior walls. This is primarily for improved R value, the existing portions of the building. So it's open cell spray foam that's being added and then drywall on the inside of that. Down the hallway, you can see the new walls being built. So primarily in a similar location, however, different arrangements. So different door locations, different wall locations, and there really is a fresh look within there. We really did gut it to the structure and then started from there. You can start to see some of the new window openings. So this is in the existing portions looking into the building addition. We took the existing windows, opened them up, and really made it almost floor to ceiling window openings in those locations. And then you can start to see the drywall finishes being installed and paint's actually going on now. Overall budgetarily wise, we're tracking where we need to. We're again in the home stretch, so I feel comfortable. The bulk of the unforeseen or contingency has been spent on poor soils and rock removal. Not a surprise in this part of the state. But we did anticipate, and we believe that we're in a good stage where we need to be. So short and sweet. Is there any questions?
What's the prognosis on that cafeteria for?
So it is being replaced, and
58,000.
correct. So that is being achieved, and
So I talked to a previous board member. And he had a meeting with, I believe, you and Eric Ports and Roger, and he was told at that time that it did not need to be replaced.
that is accurate.
Okay,
So
now, I guess my question is, we're spending $58,000 on it now. We find out it's contingency money. Two things I have is, number one, we could get that done a lot cheaper if we would have contracted it out to local contractors, but I understand through contingency money, we probably can't do that. So my problem I have is, I feel like you guys are using this as a way to get that money. Now, if I'm wrong, I'd like you to correct me.
So it is a decision that was discussed in April. At that time frame, because there was more unknowns, it was determined that there was too many unknowns to take that item on at that point. To fix the correction of that floor leveling area of there was a thing that was evaluated, and it decided to go forward to achieve the current schedule that we have in place itself. So it really was outside the main scope. There was options to have others potentially look at that. However, due to the time frame in particular and getting that done by the start of the school year, the options were limited.
Couple questions, Tim. We're still looking good as far as the timeline and the start of school.
So as far as we know, yes. So our goal is to be occupied start of school, which is basically 2 months earlier than contractually they have to be.
Okay, great. The sidewalk went on Father Street. Did you get a chance to look at that? And we talked about it a couple of times.
Yeah, so I think was it last meeting we reviewed that at length and reviewed the options there.
I guess I didn't think the last meeting. So what's the status of it?
So as of right now, we're keeping it as planned and not including a sidewalk at this point.
You're gonna have little kids walk down the street. Okay. Doesn't, I mean, I know it wasn't in part of the plan, but this last winter, I've seen it numerous times. You see kids as young as 4 years old walking on the street with cars.
So the bulk of the reason is we're really not connecting to anything. We'd be encouraging basically people to walk without a connection, and if we're trying to route vehicle traffic on that location, not pedestrians. We have other means of getting pedestrians to the site.
But there could be a connection. I mean, I'll do some discussion with the city. They spend money every day. There could be a sidewalk
if there was a further connection. I think we would
Is
want-
it Fifth Street down there?
Yeah.
That's true.
To the end of our property, and we could talk to the neighbors, and there could be a connection if we tried.
If we got a connection to somewhere, I think it would be a different conversation.
But it doesn't seem like nobody wants to try to do that. I'm just saying, that seems to be the attitude of the board, I guess, and Rancho.
I believe in the city of Mineral Point, if you're asking somebody to put a sidewalk down, it's their financial responsibility to put the sidewalk in. The city wouldn't pay.
I'm not asking for our neighbors to put a sidewalk in. I'm asking for permission to put a sidewalk on their property, possibly. Either have the school pay for it or the city pay for it. You keep the little kids off the street. That's what I'm asking.
So, is there an alternative plan to keep these kids safely walking home from school?
Didn't we discuss last meeting, we're gonna be rerouting children different ways so that they're not going down that street?
Over to Wisconsin where there's a sidewalk north and south, and over to Center where there's a sidewalk north and south.
And when you're talking about little kids, you really think they're going to take, just think about it. You really think they're going to take that route? They're going to walk an extra block and then have to walk an extra block up. You really think that's going to happen?
I don't know, but I know that there are sidewalk guards there
I
every day,
understand.
and you
I
can
understand.
train a kid to do anything.
Long story made short, we
I
spent
think-
$12 million on a street that there was no sidewalk, and it should have been integrated into the project.
I'm glad it got looked at, but that's just my
Sure.
perspective. I mean, but
I just hope,
wasn't
I really
satisfied.
hope that nobody gets that.
I wasn't satisfied with the explanation unless we had alternative routes that were on sidewalks that were safe for the kids. But that's just,
Is the retention pond gonna be fenced off?
So that's a dry retention area. It's meant to, so no, it's not planned to be fenced in. Typically they are not, especially for a dry retention area. What we find is if you put a fence in, it causes more safety concerns. Because then it's, potential traffic.
So Tim, that works on during dry times, but when there's a rainstorm, there's gonna be water in the retention.
So it's designed to discharge in 48 hours.
So there could be kids walking around that retention without a fence.
So-
More than likely there will.
So that is very common for school construction.
I understand.
To be honest, I don't know of one that has been tested.
So is there anything keeping up at night from the deadline?
Not as of yet. Things come up every day, but I think we're tracking where we need to. So lead times for equipment in particular seem to be tracking. That was our biggest concern.
So you had mentioned occupancy by your scheduled start of school date. Does occupancy mean like playground is ready to go and everything, or does occupancy mean classrooms will be available, we'll have a place to eat, and we'll figure out the rest as we go? Or is it somewhere in the gray?
It's still being developed.
Okay.
So because it's below or before we all planned, what we're aiming for is to be occupied.
Okay.
Will there be touch-up happening as in any construction project? I can guarantee probably yes. But we want it to be usable.
Dr. Dunn, there's a gal with her hand up behind her, I'll let you.
Jim, I live across the street from where you're talking about, and there's so much room in that park. Is there any way we can make a path up through the park that would be kind of a shortcut for the kids?
Through the whole
They're
scenario.
used to coming up the hill, because in the wintertime,
There is, yeah.
because in the wintertime, when it turns ice, because we go out early to drive bus, you can hardly make it up the hill, and I've seen my daughter kind of spinning her wheels going up that hill on a sidewalk. So I don't know what they do on the street.
Yeah, obviously it's a sloping site, and that has been a challenge for a lot of accessibility type conversations. Where the main entry is, and we're kind of working through those and make it as viable as we can. But I do believe there's a path through there to help facilitate that.
Would it be clean in the winter though, so they could get through?
I can't speak to that, I guess.
Is that the city street talking about?
No, it'd be a path through the north panel.
There is a walking path through the Savannah, but that just loops around. That doesn't branch out and connect anywhere.
Yeah, it's not.
But we can't make one through
I don't think there's.
Just a
anything-
thought.
I don't think there's
Just a
anything
thought.
precluding.
Because I see little kids walk on it to go play on the playground too, all year.
Obviously, spending a chunk of money on this cafeteria for our contingency funds makes us a little nervous about any contingency funds left over. Can you talk about the state of the remaining contingency fund and
Yeah,
what we're
so
looking at?
we are tracking it, and we do believe with what we know, kind of what can happen, or we feel like we are able to complete the project, and still achieve the cafeteria. So we can get into more particulars, but we can do that probably. I think we can share it probably more offline if we have more requests.
So there's no turning back on the cafeteria floor. It's already.
Yes, it's been approved.
Okay.
When would you think about setting a date for like a community visit, grand opening? So everyone can see it.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's really up to you guys when you want to have that. Typically, there's some sort of dedication. Say a month in is pretty typical. Usually start of school, you want to focus on start of school, but after that initial rush, it might be a good time to really have some type of community event.
Typically, prior to school starting, we do an open house, kind of meet your teacher kind of a thing. We look to try to push that back, not necessarily the meet your teacher, but that open house, once everything is completely ours, there aren't any touch-ups, there aren't any last minute things being done. So, but yeah, we are trying to work on putting a plan together.
Logistics on that.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
But no, it's a great thing to celebrate and have as many people as you can see it. Absolutely.
Any other questions for Tim from the board?
I guess,
Oh, go ahead.
maybe not for Tim, but just from my understanding, so when the sidewalk got brought up in the past, like, what were the options? Weren't any options?
Well, the options were, is the sidewalk feasible or, I don't want to, my understanding of remembering it is it feasible and is it workable? And then plan B is, can we route the kids? Basically direct walking routes, not down Coffin Street, because that'd be the main car traffic in and out of that drop off parking lot.
I don't know how many families will be living in the little apartment subdivision straight across from Cochran Street. I mean, it looks like it's a window of view. And you just got to envision telling a little kid, well, no, you can't walk straight to school. You got to go around and take an extra, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, I guess. And that's not the only, I mean, Hunter's Hollow, filled up over there, beautiful, beautiful subdivision.
Well, I mean, we can certainly revisit it.
Well, we gotta have a desire from Mitch and the maintenance staff to do it, and then it'll happen, but if we don't, then it's just a constant.
We just took $100,000 away from the maintenance staff.
I know, so I understand here.
Well, and I think that initially, one of our big concerns was we could put in a lovely sidewalk, but if at the end of the sidewalk, we're still dumping kids on the road, we haven't solved any problems. So I think that it may have to be a joint effort between understanding what the city of Mineral Point is willing to consider if we want to say, okay, we're willing to do this, or we're willing to go this far, here's what we want to work towards. But I don't think that, I don't think we alone can solve this issue.
Well, we alone have the biggest budget, so it starts with us for sure. And this hasn't been a brand new idea. This has been brought up to the board. I don't mention any names. A couple of staff members brought this up years ago, and it never went anywhere. And a babysitter brought it up. One of the daycares on that side of town brought it up. So, again, go
And I've seen the kids walking before too. I mean, it certainly does.
last winter really was an eye opener when they had to walk around a snowbank and just within of course, there was cars parked on the one side of the street, and there was very little room for cars to maneuver, and then you throw kids in the midst on the same street.
And then add twice the amount of normal car traffic because less people were busing. It was
creates
scary.
a dangerous situation. We talk about school safety all the time, and we spent thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars in these buildings against gun violence. And we probably got a more dangerous situation on that street.
I don't disagree. Okay, any other questions for Tim? Okay, thanks for coming.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tim.
Tim.
All right. Next is the board retreat. Just a reminder, everyone, that we settled on July 26th, which is 2 weeks from tonight. Did we settle on a location yet?
Walker House is available and is planning for us.
Okay, good.
6:30.
Okay, good. So if appreciate everyone attending if you can make it. I know Bob, you're out of town. And if you, I'll put like just a brief rough agenda as far as talking points or topics to talk about. But if you want to bring anything up specifically, feel free to let me know.
What's your topics will be about the email you sent out last week?
I'm sorry.
Regarding concerns at the weight room?
Yes, yes, as far as like future projects and things like that. That's something we can talk about. Yep. Good, okay. Next is the WASB Business Honor Roll.
This is on there just as a reminder. Next month, you'll be asked to make a selection of who you would like to nominate for recognition. I think Joelle had sent out an email. You're not allowed to, even though there might be continued support from the same places, you're not allowed to nominate somebody more than once. And then I believe Joelle shared, at least with me, that nonprofits are eligible. So it's business in a little bit looser sense. So if there's a nonprofit group in the city of Mineral Point that has been a very big supporter of things going on, supporting our kids, supporting our community, so to speak, they can be recognized as well. So just kind of start to think about, review that list that Joel had sent out, and at the August board meeting, we'll be asking for the board's nomination. Can be, you don't have to nominate anybody, it can be one, and could be up to 4 businesses. Some years we've had 4, some years we've had 2. So I mean, it can vary. There's no set requirement as to a specific number for the board to move forward.
Thanks, Mitch. Next, we'll talk about the COVID protocols for the fall. Should we, Mitch, how do you want to start? Should we, I was thinking we would get a kind of a summary of any updated guidance from CDC and health departments, from our school nurse and medical advisor, and then just so we know what we're looking at for possibly the school year, and then
I think it's a good starting point.
then we can ask questions and discuss from there. Okay. All right, I think we have them both here. Hi. This is a Sam. Or we on the table or something?
So we were just going to summarize a couple of things, but we're happy to take the conversation however we need to take it. Really ask you all to let us know what would be helpful to you as we're kind of moving forward as developing the protocols. So you did all receive that updated CDC guidance this last week. That it's a 16-page document. I have it out here. That CDC document will now be filtered through the state health departments all over the country. And then those state health departments will then filter that information down to local health departments and to the Department of Public Instruction. So they will then kind of form some of the CDC guidelines for maybe a little bit more local type of guidance. So CDC recommendations were not rule specific in how any of this gets implemented. It was more suggestions based on the science and the knowledge that we have at this point of how to best prevent COVID transmission within the schools, and also to maximize in-person time as much as possible. So the difference we have this year compared to last year is we have more knowledge. So last year we had a whole lot of uncertainty, not very much knowledge about how COVID was spread, how we can prevent it. Our testing was very limited. Testing, as we started so a year ago, essentially, testing was taking a week for results, and we now have results that are coming back in 15 minutes. And so we are in a much different situation, both with our ability to understand where our local outbreaks are, as well as understanding how things are transmitted. Remember all the talk about don't touch your face and, you know, hand washing and things like that. And a lot of that is kind of hygiene theater. There's not a whole lot of evidence that that gets you much reduction in risk of COVID. The things that give you reduction risk in COVID that we were doing last year are masking, staying home when you're sick, avoiding contact with other people when they are sick, and testing to make sure that you don't have COVID, because you can't always tell based on your symptoms. So we do have more information about how schools managed this the last year, and that's what this CDC guidance is based on. The problem is every school district did this a little bit differently because everybody was just figuring it out as they went. So everybody was building the plane, flying the plane as they were building it, and just trying to get through the year. So it's a little hard to summarize all of that data into something that's useful for each individual district. And we're also all in very different case rates, you know, different populations in terms of urban versus rural. Just a really, we have to make this decision as a district based on our own local situation, in addition to the guidance from the CDC. So the main points of that CDC guidance, and then summarized in the top, those key points in that document, is that you know, the things that several people have mentioned, masks and vaccinations are the two most effective ways to prevent spread of COVID. So that does not mean that we are forcing people to get vaccinated. That does not mean we're ever going to, certainly the school district is never going to come out and force people or require that people get vaccinated. Certainly not this year when we don't have a vaccine that has even been approved for young kids yet. What it is saying is the more people are vaccinated, the lower our disease rates are going to be, and the more protected our area is going to be against an outbreak. So if our vaccination rates are higher, we're going to have fewer cases of COVID in our schools. We're going to have fewer disruptions for our students. We're going to have fewer times where people are quarantined because there's not going to be as much exposure. They do talk again in this guidance about having a layered approach. So one thing is not the key. Vaccination is not the only thing we're going to look at. Masking is not the only thing we're going to look at. Quarantine is not the only thing we're going to look at. It has to be everything in conjunction, all together, helping to protect at multiple levels. And then on top of that is we can tweak our guidance based on our local situation. So our local situation right now is very good. Our case rates are very low currently. We have not seen wide numbers of the Delta variant yet in our area. Our vaccination rate in Iowa County is relatively high compared to surrounding counties. So our situation is going to be very different even from schools in Grant County, because it's a different levels of cases, vaccination rate, amount of travel between places, things like that. So, you know, I don't know how much you want me to go through the details of what's in this guidance, but the guidance suggests that as we have been saying, anybody who's unvaccinated, the best way that unvaccinated person can be protected against COVID is by masking and having the people around them who are unvaccinated also mask. So the guidance suggests that people who are unvaccinated should be masking in the schools. How do you implement that, right? There's, I think, going to be a lot of challenges to try to implement in a differential masking policy in any school. I don't think that that's gonna work very well. I think it's gonna be hard to enforce, it's gonna be hard to track, it's gonna be, you know, like you mentioned with the, you know, telling kids to pull their masks up. Well, how do you know if this one needs to wear a mask or this one doesn't? So that kind of thing is going to be very challenging. I think for a population that is on a large scale unvaccinated, like our elementary school area, where none of those kids have had the opportunity to be vaccinated yet, their parents may want them to be vaccinated, but they do not have that choice yet. That is a group of individuals where if we were to get a couple of cases, it would spread much more widely than in the middle school where we have these a much wider vaccine uptake. So the one way that this could go down is that there could be a policy for universal masking at the elementary school level, and perhaps middle school and high school do not need to mask on a universal setting, and we can rely on that vaccine protection and some of those other layered protections that we have in place. So there are, you know, certainly many different ways that this could play out, but I think that certainly the consideration for those young elementary school kids would not have the opportunity to be vaccinated, even if their parents chose it. Protecting them with more universal masking would be a reasonable way to go forward. Vaccine is likely to be available for the 5 to 12 group in October, perhaps early November. So first doses, consider, you know, maybe let's say late October. 3 weeks later would be a second dose, so that would be, you know, mid to late November, so Thanksgiving time. 2 weeks after that second dose is when full protection would happen. You could consider after the first semester, when we have had that, when parents of elementary school kids have had that opportunity to vaccinate their kids if they chose. If you have low disease rates and they've had that opportunity, maybe that's the time to consider loosening mask policy to kind of respond to the local situation. I'm going to talk about rates less. Oh, I do want to clarify one thing. Somebody said that there was not transmission in the schools earlier. And that is, I believe that's true at the elementary level. In any case, the only cases of transmission within the school that we are aware of in this last year were when masks were not being used appropriately. So every single case that we can identify where somebody in a classroom gave it to another person in a classroom in our school was when masks were not being used appropriately for a variety of reasons. And then if you want to know rates right now of vaccination, if that helps in any way, the kind of, you know, elementary is kind of one group as a whole. Right now, 6th grade is kind of the one where some people aren't even eligible, but some are. And so 6th grade is the touchy one, but because 6th grade has 0 vaccinations, the entire middle school has a rate of 25%. That just kind of brings it down. But again, as the year goes on, more will be eligible if they choose to get vaccinated. But in the high school, it's 39.75%, and that's just among the students. So 40%, and then if you were to include staff in that, the high school would be pretty high. Our staff, I don't have a clear picture of the staff vaccination rate because it includes so many people. When we offered the vaccine to employees, we included, you know, coaching and substitute teachers and people who have very minimal in-person, you know, interaction with students, especially. But and then I didn't get people who got back to me. But of the people who got back to me, so, and then the ones who got vaccinated, the rate is like 90%. So it's very, very good with what we have. But that's among the staff. But I would have to have more time to really break it down by building.
Sarah, you talk about how, you know, mitigating risk is a layered approach, right? If all we did was require masks, obviously that's not going to work really well because of some of the issues that were already described. There's not really 100% consistent mask wearing, right? So that's not an airtight layer. So can you talk about some of the other layers, maybe, you know, distancing, you know, what what are we going to attempt to do as best as possible? What can we do? And what would our role of, and our quarantine policy, what role would testing play? Can you touch a little bit on those two things?
Yeah, I'll start with the distancing. So when in March, CDC revised their guidance to say that students needed to be separated by 6 feet when able, and revised that down to 3 feet. That didn't affect a whole lot in our schools because we already had been spacing people out to a pretty good degree. So we didn't need that 3 feet distancing to do most of our in-person learning. It was helpful in some of the classes to be able to reach people in a little bit different way, but the recommendation is 3 feet of distancing at this point, whenever possible. I would interject that it doesn't change until something new comes out, it doesn't change the contact tracing. I think when people hear, it's 3 feet, well, contact tracing is still 6 feet at this time.
Okay.
There's the one caveat to the contact tracing. So the distancing piece, whenever possible, 6 feet, if possible, but 3 feet is acceptable. So we were already operating within that. The contact tracing piece, there is a caveat to the contact tracing where if there are 2 students, so it's a student to student, and one of the students is test positive, and the other person was, let's say 4 feet away from them, their desk sits 4 feet away. If both of those students are masked, there's that other student is not considered a close contact. That's a huge difference from last year. That masking last year in schools we were not able to change contact tracing based on masking. They are making this adjustment based on the data that show that masking between students does seem to reduce transmission in that scenario. So in the elementary school, for example, if we were not masking and there were a positive student, that could potentially be a larger number of people that would need to be isolated, contact traced, things like that. The other difference from last year is that we do have students who've been vaccinated and teachers who've been vaccinated. If those who have been vaccinated are considered a close contact, they do not need to quarantine, nor do they need to test or isolate unless they have symptoms. If they're having symptoms, then they should still get tested. So we're already cutting down our numbers of quarantines in the middle school and high school by a great number just by having a larger population vaccinated. As Larry pointed out, not a good idea to separate vaccinated people from unvaccinated people in any kind of structure in the classroom or anything like that. They actually lay that out in the CDC guidance that they don't recommend that. And one reason for that is that the vaccinated people interspersed among the unvaccinated actually protect everybody. And so those unvaccinated people would be more vulnerable if we cluster them all together in one group versus if we have everybody mixed together. The other thing we have available to us, so Jane did a great job this spring, far above what any other school nurse in our area was doing, and applied for a CLIA license. A CLIA license allows us to do testing on site for COVID if needed. We had some free kits that we got from the free clinic and had those available to test people if needed for antigen testing on school grounds. And so we used it in a pretty limited way. Our policy was mainly to help keep siblings of students with symptoms in school while we were awaiting PCR testing for the symptomatic students. So that allowed us to keep some more kids in school if they had that negative antigen test. We could potentially use that antigen test to have people ride out their isolation or quarantine on school grounds if they're willing to wear a mask and get a daily antigen test. That could be one way that we could have that, again, layered mitigation if they're considered a close contact. And then the big wild card here that I mentioned earlier, we don't have yet in our area, but the Delta variant really changes the math of a lot of how well something spreads, how many people might be considered or might get sick if they're in contact. So last year we had such good rates, we hardly had any in-school spread, so the people that were quarantined rarely got sick. this would up that number quite a bit, especially if masks were not involved. So that is one more piece of math that we would have to kind of adapt to as the year goes on. There is some suggestion in here that school districts consider having a policy, but also having a policy for upgrading their level of protection based on local levels of disease. We attempted to do that a little bit last year with that school reopening committee, and I'm not sure how helpful that those numbers and guidance and things like that were to the board. But if that's something, it's complicated for all of you to be looking at the numbers and epidemiology of everything. And so if it's helpful to have some background analysis of that, I'm sure we could make that happen.
So with the change in the guidelines, is there the potential then that if people were masked in a room and there was a positive case, but everyone was masked, they could potentially stay there?
Yes. And that's based on the data of how good masking is at preventing that transition student to student. It does not count for a teacher because the potential of a teacher transition in terms of viral load and things like that. And so if there's a teacher involved in that contact tracing, that would benefit the student.
But if the teacher's vaccinated, then and it's a way that we potentially have saying no one.
Correct.
Good.
Yes. So it could keep more kids in school if you're doing that masking universally. And also prevent transmission.
Right.
So last year, when we heard about masking, a lot of times it was that the individual wearing the mask was doing it for the protection of those around them. Is that still the mentality, or if there are people who are unvaccinated and want that protection if they mask themselves, and particularly if they have access to like an N95 mask, what is their level of protection? Or are we still talking about wearing masks to protect others?
So source control is the number one way that masks help. So by keeping the sick particles in to mask, but there is some protection from masking for everybody else for those contacts. And so it depends on the level of mask, the amount of protection that you get. If you have a single layer cloth mask, the protection with that is pretty minimal. If you have a double layer mask, potentially with one that has one of those insertable filter, the level of protection is a little greater. If you have a surgical mask, level is a little greater. There's some KN95s, which are very similar protection to the N95s, but more comfortable to use for longer periods of time. And then the N95 is that or a full respirator or the highest level of protection. So if somebody is consistently using a surgical mask, a KN95 or an N95, their level of protection, even if the people around them are not wearing masks, is fair. But the amount of protection you get if you surrounded those people by masked people is excellent. And N95 would be a big challenge to wear during school day. And even the N95s, they're comfortable for longer term use, but not something that is going to be real feasible for people to wear on a long-term basis. The other change with masking is the indoors versus outdoors, and I think you're all aware of that the outdoors, no masks are required. They did say that if you are in a high transmission area, you may consider, if you have a large crowd of people doing physical activity, for example, that masking in that scenario would be considered something you might want to do. And then some sports, some higher risk sports are still ones that masking would help.
So how does the health risk of COVID for like an elementary kid compare to say?
I have some numbers because I thought somebody might ask that question. I didn't plan that question. So in terms of COVID deaths for those under 17, so if you want just elementary school, unfortunately they break it out into age 0 to 4 and age 5 to 18. So it's really hard to tease out the actual numbers. If you do under 17, there was a total of 488 deaths in this last year from COVID. That's with all of these precautions in place. In the same time period, there was 1 flu death in a pediatric case. In a typical year, there's 199 flu deaths in those pediatric age range. And so this year, obviously 199 to 1, that was a significant reduction because masks also protect against the flu and other viruses. And so we had a considerable reduction in those flu deaths, but still with those 488 COVID deaths, that would, if you can compare even just against a typical flu year, it's a much more dangerous virus. But if you compare against the flu year we had this year, that tells you how much greater that risk even is, because even despite all the interventions we're doing, there still are kids who died from it. And then there was also mentioned earlier about the inflammation of the heart muscle. You mentioned that concern, and there, so there were, if you do, so there are some cases in especially young men, so adolescent men and young college age men, some instances of inflammation of the heart muscle after the second dose of mRNA vaccine like Pfizer. If you give 1 million second doses to that highest risk age group, you would have 39 to 47 myocarditis, so inflammation of the heart muscle cases with those 1 million doses. If you give those 1 million doses, you prevent 11,000 COVID cases, 560 hospitalizations, 138 ICU admissions, and 6 deaths. And a lot of those deaths are from myocarditis. That is common in COVID. So even though there is a risk of that vaccine, there's also a risk of COVID, and the risk of COVID is orders of magnitude higher. We're also seeing that those myocarditis cases have been so far relatively mild and self-limited, treated with common medications, maybe a hospitalization of a day or 2, but not resulting in ICU admissions and deaths. And the myocarditis cases and the MISC cases from COVID are severe cases where people are ending up on ventilators and potentially dying. So it's not saying that there's no risk, but when we are weighing risk and benefit of something, we have to look at both sides. And so that risk and benefit, it does play out for protection of that vaccine, even though there could potentially be some people who have side effects from it. And I don't take that lightly. I have kids. I studied this from beginning to end before I thought about whether my kids were going to get that vaccine. And I understand that not everybody is going to want to get vaccinated, and we don't even need everybody to get vaccinated for this to help our community. I have plenty of patients who are choosing not to get vaccinated, and that is their choice. And there is nobody who's forcing anybody to get vaccinated. But we know that our best protection as a community to move forward and to not have the disruptions of quarantines and people getting sick and people being in the hospital and spreading it to other people. Our #1 public health measure is vaccines, and a close second is masking.
Any other questions for these guys?
I got a question for you, Doug. What would the board's role be in the COVID protocol decision? I mean, last year, I don't think the board ever really voted actually on the quarantine protocol. We voted on a hybrid plan, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, my opinion is I think it should come from the board this year.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, my intent was to really have a really good discussion about all the issues, including quarantining, masking, distancing. What should we do? What can we do? What's reasonable? What's not reasonable? And then at the August meeting, we have a chance maybe for state health department, local health department to get involved. Maybe we can see what other districts are thinking about doing. And at the August meeting, we can lay out, this is our strategy, including all of those issues. And maybe we can vote on a strategic plan to mitigate COVID for the beginning of the school year, at least maybe for the first semester. With the caveat that if there is a community outbreak, we might need to ramp up things a little bit, but that's my hope. So yeah, I'm in favor of, having all of that. Yes, having that all as a topic of discussion and action from the board. Yes.
All right. You talked about not separating the vaccinated from the non-vaccinated. So if there's a high risk or a close contact, the non-vaccinated would have to quarantine, correct? The vaccinated would have to escape school.
Potentially, depending on the
I mean, that was-
masking.
Okay. So
The other possibility, and we have not fleshed this out, and we have to see how practical this would be. Again, potentially saying, okay, you can still come to school. I know you weren't masked and you're a close contact, and you're unvaccinated. You can still come to school during this time period, but you need to have a daily antigen test when you come to school to make sure that you don't have COVID that day. And that would be
every day, or just if you were
every day that you come to school for the isolation period. So you're, instead of isolating at home, you're isolating when you're coming to school, get to come to school. We would require you to wear a mask during the day because it's potentially you develop COVID during that time. And you would do a daily nasal. You can even be self-administered. A lot of times the students will swab their own nose, goes into a card, and we have the results to know that they don't have enough virus in their nose to infect another person today. And then repeated testing is the best way to use that antigen test.
So at 40% of the high school, the student body is currently vaccinated.
Yes.
So we could expect what by the time school starts, so 45, or do you think something at 40?
Maybe a couple more percentage points. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So at what percent do you think we're good?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know that anybody can give a certain answer. I would say I would feel really good about our chances to limit spread if we get to 60%. Most places are saying 70 to 80% is kind of the herd immunity rate, but I think if we got to 60%, if you think about those 40% of people going through the school day and the 60%, the likelihood that you're going to have those close contacts with those unvaccinated, more vulnerable people, and that they would end up with it's those layers, but that's a really good base layer if you can get to 50.
I'm not a medical professional, but I would say 45% is a big win. Going into the school year.
And if you look at surrounding counties, we are doing much better than some of the surrounding counties. We're especially for those teenager age groups. And so when we think about our sports team is going to need to isolate this fall. So say our football team has a case, how many of those other football players would have been exposed and potentially spreading it to other people, especially with this Delta variant? If you have 60% of your football team vaccinated, that's how many people off the top that will never need to quarantine this fall. And so it really just, if we want less disruption for our kids, we need to prevent spread of COVID. And the ways that we know how to do that, vaccination is just a really good base layer of protection. So I'm never going to, like I said, force anybody, but I think if we look at what are the risks and benefits of all of this, for a lot of kids and parents, it's going to land on the side of, I'm just going to get vaccinated. I don't want to deal with this quarantine again. Last year was terrible, or I want to be able to play my sports season, and I know that if I'm not vaccinated, I'm going to get quarantined if some other kid shows up and has it. So I think you're right that 45 is a really good, certainly better than last year. We had 0 last year, right?
So the employees, the staff, you must have somewhat of an idea of the percentage. Is it 80%? Is it
90 is 90.
It is 90%.
Yeah.
Did you say that's of the people who responded to your email?
Right. And I had a really great number respond. I did. There's a few who didn't, but truly it was a very good response.
So with that factored in, do you think it's 90% total
Of staff.
of staff?
I would have to have everyone respond. Maybe 85. I'm just from I think it's probably, and Matt, you might know a little bit more about your staff, but I think we have a pretty high uptake of the vaccine.
I don't know, I would say it's pretty high.
So we had talked about the importance of not segregating or not treating groups differently based on their individual decision to vaccinate or not vaccinate. And I think we're all in agreement that that is the place where we need to tread lightly. Are we concerned then that, kind of using the football example you used, where if I were on the football team, even though I had no intention of getting vaccinated, I'm now suddenly feeling a lot of pressure around like, hey, I'm going to want to play. So even if the guy next to me isn't vaccinated and gets symptoms, or, you know, it tests positive, I still want to play. So now I'm feeling pressure to get
Exactly
vaccinated.
what it is.
Is,
There's no question about it. It's
have we
pressure.
crossed that line? I'm,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's,
yeah, I do want your
You want
opinion.
my opinion? Oh, absolutely. And I think that 40 or 39.75%, you would be surprised how many came from the sports end of this school that have been in sports. They were already pressured to do it. It's really sad, Joan.
All right, were they pressured
You
by,
have that number, Joan? Or Jane, you have that number of who the kids that are in sports that got the vaccine versus non-sports kids?
no, I didn't separate that out.
but is that pressure, I guess, is that an internal pressure or is it an external pressure? If they're doing it because, I don't know, that's something that I'm toying with in my brain right
I
now.
would also, piggyback on that and say, if they are feeling that I don't want to be quarantined, last year was terrible, I'm just going to get vaccinated to make sure that I'm protected or that I don't have to quarantine. What can anybody identify what the problem is with that, other than we shouldn't be encouraging people to get vaccines if they don't want to get vaccines? Is there, I'm having a hard time understanding. If they're saying, please, I understand this is what would happen if I don't get vaccinated, this is what is happening if I do get vaccinated, and they're making that choice and talking to their parents about all these kids are underage, right? So they have to have parental consent for this. So, you know, I don't, no teacher is selling vaccine, right? No, we don't have the capacity to go around and push people to get vaccine, but we are going to offer it. And if people know this keeps me from getting sick and keeps me from quarantine, there are some people who are going to say that sounds like a win for me, I'm just going to take it. And I don't know that that is a negative pressure by saying you're going to be punished if you don't get it. I think it's, you know, this is how you will continue to need to require to do these things if you don't get it, because you potentially could spread it to other people. If you do get the vaccine, then you don't have to do those things because we know that it protects the people around you when you get that vaccine. I don't think it's a reflection of just the school. I mean, this is just how it is across the world and across the country. I don't think Interpoint's doing anything. I guess I haven't seen any internal pressure for anyone to get vaccinated. And school nursing is public health, and so I guess if there's a public health thing that I can offer, I would do that.
I think about, there's places where you travel and you have to, you know, you have to prove you've had your vaccine. So is it different if I'm wanting to participate in a certain type of activity or event or behavior, then
And part of it is that we know that those activities carry higher risk of transmission too. So, you know, that may also be the pressure of knowing a lot of people on my team got sick last year and I want to get sick. So that is also a pressure of, you know, I want to have that vaccine for that reason. But our numbers, if you look at Iowa County as a whole, our vaccine numbers are similar to the rest of Iowa County. So I don't think that, you know, the Mineral Point kids are getting pressured in any way that the Dodgeville kids are getting, you know, it's the same. All these conversations are happening in all these households all across the country, and parents and kids are coming to a conclusion about what works best for them and their family.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so like I see Iowa County is one of the 18 low counties in Wisconsin, like 0 case rate for the last 7 days. So we take that with our relatively high vaccine rate and an optional mask policy. would there be that much difference between a mandatory face mask policy and an optional
Are you talking about at the middle school and high school level or the
one? In our
elementary?
school,
Okay, well, so the elementary school vaccine rate is quite low. And we are going, while our case rate is low, we are still, the numbers from this last week pushed us into the moderate level strategy, just barely, but we're in the moderate level strategy on that CDC guidance. I think we'll get back down to low, but we are doing a fraction of the testing that we were doing during the school year. So we are going to have a case positivity rate that's going to be higher, and that is potentially going to influence our number as well. So we are a little bit flying blind right now because we're not getting the level of testing that we were getting earlier in the school year. So there are likely cases out there that we don't know about, people who think that they have a cold and they're not getting tested. I think while right now in this moment, if we had unvaccinated, unmasked kids in the elementary school all mixing together, the risk of disease might be low in this moment. Next week could be a totally different story if we happen to get one person in this county with a Delta variant, we're all of a sudden dealing with a totally different map. And you can't, I've heard the analogy that the United States likes to slam on the brakes after it's hit the tree. And so once we have a big outbreak, then we start to get really worked up and we start to panic and we back down on things. But we're not very good at seeing that tree coming and saying, this is a setup for if we're not gonna have this level of protection, we need to have this other level of protection that's gonna make sure that we're not headed for a tree. Then the other thing is, are people gonna be willing, if we say our case rates are higher, now everybody has to mask, are people going to be able to go from that low level of intervention? Oh, we don't have to do anything, COVID's over, we don't have to worry about it. Now, all of a sudden, everybody has to mask, the teachers are having to reinforce it with students, every 5 minutes and things like that, versus last year when the kids got pretty used to it, at least at the elementary school level. I don't know how middle school, high school went towards the end. So do I think that that's a risky proposition to say, let's put all these unmasked kids, unvaccinated, all in the same room right now with the disease rate low? Not necessarily, but what about next week and what about 6 weeks from now? We don't have that protection for those kids. So we have to really implement those other layers of protection so that we keep those case rates low.
Yes, my biggest concern is when will ever be good enough that mask would not have to be worn.
Great question. And Larry basically just asked that. It's like, at what vaccination rate are we feeling safe? And I think that's a question we have to really grapple with.
The rate is one thing, but really the choice is the other thing. So once all the elementary school parents have been offered the option of vaccinating their child if they choose, and they can return to school with that extra layer of protection, then as the conversation happened in the last month, when people have had the choice and they've made that choice to say, we're not going to do that, forget that vaccine, I don't want to do that, you have that choice. Those kids at the elementary school have not had that choice yet. Those parents have not had that choice yet. And so we're asking them, with not having a virtual option at the elementary school level this year, we're asking them to potentially put their kid into in-person school without having that choice, right? We're not saying, if you don't feel comfortable, just keep them virtual. We're saying, this is the only option. Masks are not required, and you don't have a choice for a vaccine. So, decide what you're going to do.
Well, it sounds like it's either mask or no mask, and currently the board is optional mask. So if parents want masks on their children, certainly that's available. But I think we got to remember that.
I think our
But it
wording
also
is
protects other
encouraged.
people. So it's not just about protecting you, it's about protecting other people.
I can speak to the days mask wearing rate in summer school. It's very few masks to be ordered, but probably half of them, 120.
And that situation I think is different from the school year in terms of the mask optional policy, because there were fewer kids in the building. some of their activities might be outdoors because weather permits. And it's not compulsory. So, during the school year, if your child is going to come to school for an education, you don't have a choice, right? We're not offering that choice. We're not saying you can be virtual if you want. So it's compulsory. You have to educate your child, and this is the only choice of where to do it. And so asking everybody to universally mask, as the guidelines are suggesting, as everybody is saying, from every public health level down, unvaccinated people should be masking when they're indoors. And I know that's not being followed on a regular basis, but we have the framing for that because they did it all of last year. The teachers are, used to doing this, and if we ask to do it another maybe 4 months and then reassess where we're at after the first semester and say everybody has had that opportunity to be vaccinated, now we may remove one of those layers of protection because we have this other layer of protection. But there's, I can't put a number on what makes us safe, what number of vaccinated people in a building makes us safe from having outbreaks. But, the counties and the areas that have very low vaccination rates right now are having the worst outbreaks in the country, and a very large numbers of hospitalizations and deaths, unfortunately, in those lower vaccination rates. And they're on the level of 35 to 40 in those areas of Arkansas and Missouri where they have the worst outbreaks right now. So if we got to 40, I don't know that that's enough to protect us.
Would you anticipate these national guidelines being filtered through the state and local health officials?
Well, unfortunately, we normally have, I would say before August, but the next meeting with Iowa County, and we'll get something from the Department of Health Services in Wisconsin that will come out, and then Iowa County will follow up, and they pretty much follow suit. They'll take into consideration local numbers, but the next meeting with Iowa County is bumped out a week. It usually would have been the 4th, but now it's the 11th. And I think that's 2 days after the next board meeting. But I do anticipate having something before then. So one way this could filter down is Jane and I get what is coming from DHS, and then we sit down with the admin team and come up with a suggested framework. And then the admin team brings that to the next board meeting, and you all can vote on it and decide each piece of that framework.
Sounds like a good next step.
As we move forward here, and I'm sure we'll be discussing this mask, I'm speaking to the board only. Larry, you weren't at the last meeting. When we had that meeting to remove the masks, I find it interesting now, what I heard tonight, that we know that there was transmission in the high school from students who were supposedly not wearing a mask. We know that now. But we didn't know that the last month when we had it on the agenda to take the mask policy off. I think that would have been, I'm talking to the board, I think that would have been very good information to have. I don't believe it for a minute.
I raised my eyebrows when.
Because the reason why I don't believe it for a minute is because unless you have cameras in the room, you have no proof. And it's all hearsay. And hearsay holds up to nothing in the court of law. So I don't believe it for a minute. I think if that is valid evidence, we should have had it at the last meeting when we discussed about the safety of elementary school children coming to this building for summer school. We should have had that at last meeting, and it was not presented. Therefore, I don't believe it.
I'm sure we know that students weren't wearing masks because some of our own board members were not wearing masks.
No, this is
Before we,
I'm
I'm talking about last
This is a
meeting.
while ago.
Before we repealed the mask policy, there were 2 board members who came in not wearing masks.
That's
So
because
we know, and we ask people who are coming into the building to put a mask on. And we know if people on the board, I'm not criticizing the people who weren't wearing masks. But if we know people on the board who make the policy are not following our own policy, we know there's a problem. We know people are not doing it.
Just to be fair, Bob, I was at a track meet where we were supposed to be wearing masks. You weren't like, well, it was outdoors, and I wasn't wearing a mask.
It's fine. People can choose to wear a mask or not.
I'll remind you
But
about
we
that.
make policies.
The policy expired at the end of the school year. It was over.
I
That's
don't
why
think we took any signs down.
it doesn't matter. It expired.
Hey, Go ahead.
And I'll just say one more thing, that I would have been happy to provide that guidance last time, that that's where our risk was for exposure, but before that last meeting, I was not asked if I had any opinion on any of those masking policies. I'm happy to provide any of that information when I'm asked for it, but I'm advisory. I'm not making the decisions. I am giving the information when it's requested of me. But if I'm not aware of a need for more information, then I'm not able to provide that, unfortunately. It is frustrating as a healthcare provider who's been dealing with this for over a year now on a daily basis. And having talked with Jane, Jane and I didn't know each other before last school year, and she is probably one of my most texted and called people of this last year, because we had so many conversations about, okay, there was this situation, how does this fit within the guidelines? Which of these people, I measured out these desks, what do you think about these exposures, things like that. And the cases that we had where there was in-school spread, I will state it one more time, and I'm not making this information up, it was when masks were not being used consistently in a classroom setting. And so those are the ones we can prove. There are plenty of transmissions that we can't prove because people were not getting tested necessarily on a regular basis. But though that transmission, we can say with certainty that there was transmission in school because masks were not being used appropriately in a very specific situation on 2 separate occasions. So this has gotten to be a very long year, and I know that it's long for all of you who had to make these decisions and hear all the complaints from parents and students and things like that. But we are doing this with the goal of, number 1, preventing COVID spread in our schools, and number 2, trying to have as many people in person for learning as much as possible. And so if we're going to do those 2 things, it needs to be a group effort. We need to be trusting of each other and respectful of each other, and understanding that the guidance is based on science. It's not based on somebody's feelings. It's based on science and data. And that's where we're at. And this is the data that we're using today is the best data we're going to get. If we get new data that informs a different choice, we'll certainly share that data out to the board so that you all can do it.
Thank you for being here. Okay.
Thank you.
So just a reminder, this will be on the August agenda. With some kind of laid out strategy that's come from health advisors through the administration and to the board.
Should we just have to go on the table and if we have thoughts, we can say it, or you want to move on?
I kind of want to move on, but if you want to share some final thoughts, you go ahead.
Just really quick. It seems like there's 2 different subsets here. Of course, it's elementary school and middle school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised to hear that we're at 40% currently, and then the employees at possibly 5%. That's very good news. The elementary school doesn't have a luxury, of course, so that's going to have to be decided. But the third and most important factor here is I think we're all in agreement, is we don't want to create 2 different groups throughout the schools, vaccinated or unvaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we talk about a player on the team, it's not vaccinated, it's contact, well, everybody's going to know who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated either by wearing a mask, and that is not fair. That cannot happen. So whatever we come up with, it has to be somewhat universal across the board.
Any other
Yeah,
final thoughts or questions?
I just wanted to clear up something. So at last month's board meeting, so during the summer, I thought it was optional to wear a mask when kids were not in school for like board readings and other things.
I just saw the signs on the door that said you have to wear a mask.
I know, but I'm also vaccinated too.
Oh, yeah, so am I. Not that I don't know if I want to be sharing that, but I am vaccinated as well. And I just thought that was the policy, you know, I thought it was the policy, and if I was wrong, correct me. But we were asking anyone visiting the building.
Mitch, did the campus mask policy expire before we voted on it?
It would have been repealed or would have been gone, come off the books after that board meeting.
But it didn't expire before the board meeting.
No, it wasn't a school year, it was when
The
you,
policy was till the end of the school year. So is that the end of the fiscal year?
That was the last action the board took.
Right.
Dr. Lindsay is still on the board. I think.
Straighten out. I don't care. I don't want to dwell on it, but
I'd have to go back and look at
Yeah,
that,
that's-
just to make sure that was.
You got a hand raised behind you.
oh, well, we.
It's that pesky Teresa.
Well, we did have our communications at the beginning of the meeting, and we're just gonna stick
I'm
with it.
sorry.
That's okay, thank you. Okay, next we'll go to a budget comparison update.
You have a copy of the June budgets from 2020 and 2021 of the fiscal year. I guess I apologize for not looking closely enough to get a specific answer. In June of 20, we had expended 102% of our budget. I'm not sure how we did that, but so far through the end of June in this fiscal year, we've expended 97.25%. Track down some answers as to how we spent a little over our previous year's budget. That is a budget comparison between the two years.
Okay. Any surprise expenses or anything since the last board meeting?
No. No, as a matter of fact, Bill's paying us relatively short in this budget packet.
Given the nature of the year
Yeah, given the nature of the year,
or the time, I should have said time of year, I guess.
both. You get to that, when auditors look at when purchases are made, if it's made middle of June, they anticipate that's something that hadn't been used for summer school. They're looking at that as a next year purchase and shift that purchase to the following fiscal year. So yeah, there's no surprise purchases here at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on the budget comparison? No, okay. We'll move to action items. Number one is approving the academic standards for the school year.
Every year, the school board has to approve the academic standards. Mineral Point has a requirement of 24 credits. Students need to pass at least 24 credits. 4 in language arts, 3 in math, 3 in science, 4 in social studies, which includes modern American history and social issues of government, or AP government, would suffice for the what's called SIG. The kids all call it SIG, social issues of government. 1.5 credits of FIAD, a half a credit of health, a half a credit of personal finance, and then there's 7.5 credits of electives that students must take. They can certainly take more, and we oftentimes have students taking graduating with a lot more than the 24 credits. Those are our academic standards. Each year we need your approval. That exceeds the state standards and recommendations for required credits. So we just need your approval on those academic standards for the academic school.
I will make a motion to approve that.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I just asked what's the state, so.
Or how do we exceed it?
We exceeded, we have, Mr. Austin.
Sorry, I was opening the door.
How do we exceed state standards? Which areas, or did the state finally catch up like in science?
Social studies. we do
Social
4,
studies, we require 4.
And you only need 3
Yeah,
according to the
state really is social
Everything
studies.
else.
I think the rest are equivalent. but
Say social studies
we
is the
have
one
4.
where.
One time, the state only required 2 science credits, and we were requiring 3, and then the state caught up to that, but we require 4 in social studies. And the state only requires 3 there.
Do any of our students struggle to graduate due to the social studies requirement? Is that a roadblock for anybody?
I have not seen it as a problem.
No, I don't see it as a problem either.
We have supports in place.
Right.
And there's such a diverse amount of social studies options that our students are taking, that they have some choice in what those four are.
Yeah, and like going today counts as a half a credit, so if they missed something, they can make that half a credit up as well. That's one option. I get some credit.
The other component that was passed a few years ago is our students are required, just like every other student, you have to pass a civics test. And we've not had any issues in multiple opportunities. Our students don't have any problems passing that civics exam in order to earn that high school diploma.
Good. Are they the same requirements as last year?
Yes.
Okay. No further questions, comments? Okay, call the question, Mitch.
So to approve the academic standards as presented, Sullivan.
Yes.
Skelding.
Yes.
Stefan.
Yes.
Janetka.
Yes.
Heisner.
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes.
Passes.
Next is approval of handbooks.
You have
You
a
wanna
copy, you have a copy of the elementary student, middle school activity, middle school handbook, the high school athletic handbook, high school student employee handbook, and the safety handbook. You can do them individually, you can do them in their entirety, all handbooks together. I would ask Mr. Austin, you said there's a few editorial changes that have been made in the high school. That's probably, and the high school activities or athletic handbook.
So, yeah, just the one change in the activity handbook, we are shifting to what the WIAA has as their handbook, so midterm grade would not make you eligible. That thing has been pulled out of there, but that's what the WIAA goes by. So that's all, we're just shifting it so it lines up with the WIAA. Is there any questions on that?
So the revision states that the midterm grade would make you ineligible or would not?
Would not.
You're removing that.
We're
Okay.
removing that.
Okay.
We don't see a ton at that point. Kids getting ineligible for that, so for not.
I think the WIA's language might say like the final grading period. So that's a grading period is really quarter.
Yeah.
And we had tried to address that a year ago with a midterm check, but now we're not running into issues, so we're just taking the midterm
And
check.
we're on a credit or a grade report. I run it every Wednesday. So we know where kids are at. So what kid we can be accountable.
And this, my question has nothing to do with this school district, but this is WIA basically saying we don't care about the midterms. Is that kind of what I'm?
I think they've been on the final grading period for a while. Ours has always had to.
Right, we've always, I get that.
Right.
I guess my thing is, why is WIA awarding teams for academic all standards, but yet they're not caring about midterm grades?
That's a great
I
question.
mean,
I mean, that's a great question. You know, yeah, when you look at our kids, our volleyball academic all state, we have a lot of great.
3.82 for a team average is incredible.
Yep, absolutely.
When you say midterm, you mean mid-quarter?
That's a progress report.
Progress report.
When a progress report goes out, if a student was receiving an F, they would become ineligible for it until they made that grade up. Go ahead.
So I believe certainly in the high school handbook and maybe in all of the handbooks here, the COVID-19 language is still as it was printed last year.
So it's actually the COVID-19, there's nothing in the elementary or middle school about COVID, and then it's in the high school and it's in the emergency response plan. So regardless of what, I agree the language needs to be clean, but we probably need some consistency. Or maybe somebody else saw it. I didn't see it in the
It's not in
elementary and
yours.
middle.
No, it's in mine.
It's in,
it's
it's
in
in
my-
math,
It's in mine.
Okay.
but
We
not in the
cleaned it up.
elementary or middle.
Okay.
So like we changed instead of mask are required, mask are optional, but it's strongly encouraged. Just basically what you guys said. Everything else is more just, if you're sick, stay home. There's nothing major, but I figured that would probably get edited depending on what you guys choose as a protocol. Right. That part we'll edit to that.
All right.
My final question on the handbooks is with the transgender policy that we adopted a couple months ago, maybe 3-4 months ago. Was there anything added in the handbooks on that?
Not that I know of. The only thing I gave Angie to change to the handbook is last fall, if you remember, there was an update made to Title IX. And we had to update our policies. And so Title IX has a new non-discrimination policy that's now the last 2 pages of all the handbook, because by law, we have to publish it in all handbooks and publish it once a year, and it's on our website. So that was the only change I made to any of the handbooks from last year, was making sure the Title IX notice was current.
And the transgender policy that was passed basically is an addition to our current non-discrimination policy.
It is a rule in addition to the non-discrimination policy.
Right, so that would be under this umbrella of that last paragraph that's been added.
I believe so,
Is
yes.
that correct? Okay.
So the non-discrimination policy, I believe Angie put as the final 2 pages in each.
Yeah, I see it.
And that's why in the high school, the COVID stuff after that, so we need to get rid of it. It doesn't discriminate. So that's why it's there. It is there. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's good. But it's one of those things that we'll adjust it as you guys make your decision.
We will be getting rid of the COVID stuff at some point.
I like that.
That's right.
So
We all get on board that one.
in light of the COVID stuff though, all 3 of the policies, all 3 of the academic policies have language around attendance. And does there need to be greater emphasis put on not attending school if you are not well? I think the world of perfect attendance is not something we're striving for in this day and age. And I think that's been struck, but.
I would never looked at it that way. It might be a slippery slope on that one.
Okay.
Family might see that, certain families that struggle to get to attend on a regular basis. So, define what's not feeling well. We don't want kids coming in sick.
And I get, even like the just perfect attendance, because I think right now,
I don't encourage that either.
we don't want to encourage perfect attendance, really. Perfect attendance is going to school when you're healthy and not going when you're sick and, contaminating everyone.
Yes.
And I've struggled, I know with the high school, we have the 210 plan. I struggle with that on many levels. One, I think kids should take exams, but that's just me. 2, we're encouraging people to maybe go to school, even now in days of COVID, not get tested, because they don't want to be taken out of school where they'll miss and have to take the final.
And that there is language, and I believe in there that says about principal's discretion.
Okay, good.
There's language around.
Good. Okay, good. I just want to make sure, because I don't want.
With COVID, with all this stuff, there's still got to be some discretion.
Yeah.
Because things come up. It happens, right? Can I point out a couple other things in our handbook just so
Yes.
we get through? We did change. It's highlighted red, so we cleaned up some of the wording. I'm not seeing very wordy, so we kind of shortened it. We worded it. The 2-hour late start schedule you'll see there, that shifted middle school lunch earlier in the day, because when they were coming at 10, they didn't eat until like 1 o'clock. So we shifted that ahead of time. That'll all get taken care of. It doesn't really change a lot around other than just put middle school lunch a little bit earlier. One of the changes we're going to make here, and I'm probably going to hear about it a little bit, but with the cars, students are expected to park their cars in the large parking lot or the north side of the gym. The reason for that small parking lot where you guys pull in by the front there, we're going to put a couple visitor stalls in there so we can have people when they come have a place to stop, park. The other thing, last year alone, we had 3 accidents where kids backed out into each other because it's such a tight parking lot that we'd rather alleviate that and have them park along the north side or park out in the big parking lot, just so you're aware. Yeah, again, not a big deal, but morning practice, kids are going to park along the north side, come into the locker rooms that way.
My insurance, man, thank you.
It's more things that this school wasn't built right from the start.
Yep, but like I said, there was 3 last year. That's just last year alone. So that's one of the changes. One of the next changes, instead of 6.5 credits, we're going to ask that kids take 7 credits. Study halls seem to be a lot of downtime at times, and we want kids to gain experiences. So we're going to ask that they're in 7 each semester.
Just to, again, gain more experience, and there's always exceptions to things, there's IEPs, there's things like that, but we really want kids to be in classes to experience things, right? That's the goal here. Experience it so you know if you like accounting, or if you don't like accounting, hey, that's great, go try this. So that's something that Andy and I have worked a lot on here, but we've kind of got everybody into 7 classes each semester. To try and get more kids into classes to experience things.
Hey, Mr. Austin,
Yep.
back to the cars and like just like
Yeah.
parking lot safety and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
You know, have we taken a hard look at just the drop off pickup flow with the buses and whether to, and you know, if there is an established kind of flow, you know, in and out, coming in on the north end or the south end or whatever. If there is kind of a way that you want parents and kids to go, either entering school or exiting school, pick up, drop off. You know, I don't know if painting arrows is helpful or if it's only during those times. Maybe we can, you know, especially for new parents, you know, orientation for 6th grade parents, you know, say, hey, this is how you drop off your kid. This, you know, because you know, cars can be, when buses are parked and cars are coming right at each other, you know, I mean, it's, if there's just some kind of standard flow and then education of that flow so that we can try something.
Gianna and I are gonna work on it here next month. I
Okay.
want to send a letter out to all.
Okay.
I'm sure Vic will obviously be taking on that too.
Even just maybe a
It'll kind of
flow
have
map
a
or something.
little map on that. I'll talk with Bill and we'll try to get a little better traffic for that. Before school, it's not, I don't know that it's as congested with bus traffic because they're a little bit more sporadic.
Sure.
And buses tend to pick or drop off basically right out in front of this.
Well, you guys know best where the problem
But the end of
areas are.
school, I know can be a challenge, and I know that there's some coaching that takes place at both buildings for drop off and pick up, but I can certainly include that in there. They work on a letter and kind of help staff or families. Coach just to be upfront a little bit more.
And maybe even share that with Ms. Dahl during like 6th grade parent orientation.
Yep, definitely. Some of the other things, just to clean up some of the attendance language, it seemed to repeat itself a little bit to kind of clean it up and make it a little more straightforward for us as far as truancy. So that's not necessarily a sick thing, but we're not getting kids here. We cleaned up some of that. We also cleaned up some of our discipline policies and procedures. We cleaned that up a little bit too. So it read a little better after going through it for a couple of years. We kind of know now how to readjust some things. So those are a couple of things we just kind of changed around. We got rid of one of the steps because we don't really do lunch detentions up here. Like in the middle school, you'll see a lunch detention one. We don't do lunch detentions. We have after school detention. So we got one less step on that in the middle school. I don't know if there's other questions. There's a lot of it is just trying to clean up the language that seemed to repeat itself or try to make it a little more, a little easier to digest if you're reading it.
Mr. Austin, just back to WIAA athletic qualifications. Do we follow then, if now that we're removing this midterm grade, do we just kind of follow what they say, or do we have some of our own rules too?
So it's correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a 15 days after that final grading period that you're out. Okay. Then you have to, then it's rechecked. And if it's not up at that point, then it continues until it's not.
I'm not 100% positive. One time the WI allowed you to fail at least one class and still be eligible, and minimum point is never have that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still the case for the WIA, but at one point in time you could, per the WIA rules, you could fail one class and still be able to play. And minimum point has never had that.
Good. I'm just wondering, you know, because it seems like midterm or early is where we could maybe, and if we don't suspend them from play, require that they meet, like have a requirement that they meet with the guidance counselor or teacher in whichever class.
Yeah. So that's RTI stuff.
So
that's why I print that report every week.
Okay,
So I definitely know who's doing it or who's got grades that need up. And those teachers get a report and that's an RTI thing, I would say. So that's where we're really
okay.
bringing them in. They're gonna be focused to get that grade up.
I just want to make sure, before it gets too late.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So,
Is the 210 plan common in other districts or a plan of similar makeup?
Honestly, I'd have to check around with other districts and what they do. I know there are schools that if your grades are good enough, you volunteer to take finals like a kid here to boost your grade but not hurt your grade so you can get that experience.
Does Darlington use it for the second semester?
I think that's what Darlington is for the second semester.
And we're the fourth quarter.
Correct.
Yeah. So,
And I think Dodgeville has something, I think Dodgeville put in something as well.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if it's semester or full quarter.
I can look into it.
Has there been any discussion about changing that?
Or spring.
Matt, since you've been on board?
Truthfully, I like it, to tell the honest truth, because we added a caveat to it my first year, and we'll get back to that this year, with the enrichment, offerings. So if you were to look at that, in there it says they got a complete 3 enrichment, courses.
Okay.
In order to not be offered 210s. We actually added another thing to that they have to kind of participate in. We'll get back to that this year. I've talked to quite a few of the teachers who are excited to get back to that enrichment offering that we had, not last year, but the year before, where that was RTI for 3 weeks. You kind of came in, you did the enrichment offering, and then we added that to it.
Is it for freshmen, sophomore?
I believe,
Just junior, senior?
I want to say it's,
I think it's all 4 classes.
I think it is, but I.
Is there still an academic component to the 210?
Yes, yep, that's added too. So the enrichment activities are required grades 9 through 11. The seniors obviously have a lot of other things where they're doing, but we do offer them for the seniors. They're just not required. And then they have to pull at least a 70% in a class. So if they weren't failing a class, but they had a 65% in math, they'd have to take the math. They would kick off the 210. You have that other academic component. We've added those over the last couple of years.
And you don't think we're giving anything up back then, but and I say exams, I mean,
Honestly, no, I think the rigor is throughout the school year. That we do a really good job as a teaching staff for that. It's being challenged a lot of times, so I think it's good. Plus, they do have to take mid-year finals, right? So it's not like they're never experiencing a final.
First semester.
They have to take first semester finals. They have to take. That's required by law.
thank you. I always wondered. So I just wanted that while we were talking about
Yeah,
it.
Ask questions.
Have we ever gotten feedback from students who left, who went on to a 4-year type of college program that, they didn't feel prepared around the testing component of it? I can't imagine that's the type of feedback you get, but that's what crosses my mind is
Spoiler alert, that's part of Dr. Dunn's retreat.
we're all tested, we're all taking tests.
I haven't gotten a lot of feedback that way. Most of the kids I see, and again, I don't see them that often unless they come up here or happen to bump into them, seem to be very successful with whatever they go into. Not just college, right? We're talking about the workforce, we're talking about.
Right. I was thinking very
I don't get
specifically about
that a
that
lot.
testing component.
Right, I don't get that a lot, but I guess I've never specifically asked that question to those kids.
I think that's good.
May I say something there? Quickly? Caleb's been out for a few years, but he didn't feel real ready for testing in college. So I'm just throwing that out. That was his, of course he told me, but he went to everybody else. He didn't really feel, he's doing fine, he's doing great. He feels, but he didn't feel real, even yet he doesn't feel real ready for the test.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it the last retreat, maybe like some kind of postgraduate survey of recent grads,
Would be
like
interesting.
how well prepared did you feel for the next level, whether it be job, school, whatever, because we really,
That evening was dedicated toward.
we really were
that.
wanting, you
But I
know,
think COVID came in.
are we career ready? Are we a college ready, you know, type of district? And yeah, I hope to come back to that.
I mean, I would like us to be both. I don't think we should say we want to be career
No,
ready or college ready.
exactly.
We want to be ready to be contributing members of society in whatever path is appropriate for our students.
Mr. Austin will have some data that future ready was kind of when the programming came in and it was talking about. Are you future ready? Are you ready for a career or are you ready for college? Is it a 2-year, 4-year? There were indicators that they deemed these were essential, these things, if it was good attendance, if it was grades here, if you'd taken these classes and so on and so forth. And I know Mr. Austin will have some data that, you know, if you'd like, I could certainly have that available and share that out at that board retreat on the 26th. But I know that there is data that we're kind of tracking for that purpose.
It's just kind of interesting to know why we do what we do and if it works for people.
Good questions, comments. Thank you for the summary of the revisions.
Yeah.
Are there any other handbook revisions we need to be aware of?
Do we need to address the fact that the COVID policy appears it's not consistently applied, or do we just know that that's changing? That will change.
I believe the national board will take next month or sometime will supersede.
Or yeah, you could just say that any changes reflected in all handbooks at your August meeting based on your decisions at that point.
Okay.
Maybe entertain a motion to approve booklets contingent that whatever we specify as the COVID policy for the year would be added to the handbooks.
I'd make that motion then, fine with that.
Second.
Either discussion, questions, concerns?
We've had an hour of discussion for no reason. No, I have no question.
Okay.
Did I miss my window
For what?
for another discussion item?
No,
on
please,
handbooks?
go ahead.
So this includes the employee handbook, and last year we talked about including a clause around moral turpitude. And there was a lot of other stuff going on at the time, specifically around COVID. We said that's a topic that we need to come back to when we aren't dealing with things like shutting down the school. Are we ready to deal with that now? Or is that still a parking lot item that we come back to later?
Well, it was a hot topic, wasn't it?
It was brought up.
It was,
Uh,
and it was about, I mean, it was about the time we were talking about the handbooks. I think there were a variety of issues that brought it to the surface.
You remember what page that was, Jeremy? I'm scrolling on it now. It's about basically self-reporting. Right? Mitch, do you remember that at all?
The online version is not searchable, at least not the way I'm looking at it.
Reporting of what?
In kind of arrests or charges or it's happening. That might reflect a moral turpitude, to borrow a phrase. You know, I think we were initially kind of uncomfortable with the vagueness of the policy, and then you know, I think we had a pretty decent review over the role of superintendent, you know, in taking disciplinary
Yes,
action.
please.
Me too, of the employee handbook.
Scrolling through.
That's what I felt like.
Right, so
So
that'd be, I think, page 180 of the board.
yeah, all employees shall notify immediate supervisor as soon as possible, no more than 3 calendar days after an arrest, indictment, conviction, no contest or guilty plea or other education of the employee for any felony or offense involving moral turpitude, any of the other offenses that indicate. So, I don't.
Without
Do you-
going into details, I'm fine with this.
I think as we read it now, I think that the fact that there was a lack of consequences, that the only, other than reporting, we had no, according to this, we have no grounds to take any action. Should we feel it necessary? What is our legal stance to take any action?
And I think we concluded that
That we're fine.
that the superintendent has the authority to
Do
take
things.
that action
Okay.
at his discretion with our, our awareness. And that it does require discretion, which is why it wasn't required to be put in the handbook to be like cookbook.
Thank you.
Okay, good question though. Any other discussion before we approve the handbooks or vote on the handbooks? Excuse me. Okay, call question, Mitch.
So I have a motion to remove all handbooks as presented with a possible addition of new COVID protocols after the August board meeting. Sullivan,
Yes.
Janetka,
Yes.
Skelding,
Yes.
Stefas. Yes. Eisner,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, next is approving Fund 46 transfer.
We did not hear at the end of the day today from Johnson and Block on the audit. There's still a few things that are taking place with the audit, but of the Fund 10 monies, the preliminary total available to transfer to Fund 46 is $350,000. I recommend that we transfer, that you approve that transfer to Fund 46.
Is that number a little higher than, I feel like that's
Yes.
more than a little higher than we talked about last go
Yes.
around?
And I had asked Marcia to kind of go through some areas to kind of help identify. And at all three levels, insurance was one of the biggest areas that monies were not expended this last year. Both dental and medical. We had a couple of staff members who received what's called a pay deduct. Maternity leave and not have sufficient amount of sick leave built up, but they were taking FMLA leave. That impacts their pay. Our substitute pay, because of the course of the year, wasn't as high as it has been in past years. I don't believe it or not, our busing account wasn't. There was quite a bit of money that was left over in our district busing account. So there were some significant pools of money that we put in the budget for normal years that, because it was such an abnormal year, wasn't not expended. So that allows us to use for capital maintenance projects moving forward.
That number again, Mitch?
350,000. That still leaves some monies available for journal entries if there were a need to make a transfer from Fund 10 to either Fund 27, Special Education, Fund 50, Food Service, that there is some monies available that will allow for that to happen.
And the amount of money left isn't enough for us to lose any funding going forward.
By this transfer, no.
The nice part about this, Mitch, is that we receive state aid on this thing moving forward.
It is an expense, so yes.
And we took Roger's budget of $100,000 to balance the budget, and we were gonna reimburse it out of Fund 46, so this gives that fund a little more cushion too.
Based on the
Ease
number
that
of projects that you had approved out of Fund 46 that were completing over the summer, it's almost a replacement of that.
Do you expect Johnson and Block's report to come back soon?
There's been some changes at Johnson and Block, not bad changes.
Sure.
The primary person responsible for our audit, Quinn, has kind of moved up in Johnson and Block, and another person is kind of moving in. So Quinn is kind of helping this individual with our audit. Typically, as Marcia would say, within a day or two after they've completed their in-building audit, we have some pretty firm numbers. There was just a couple of things that we were waiting on, but they should be finishing up their audit.
I mean, if I make a motion to approve the transfer and contingent upon a successful audit, would that create any?
We would need to, in essence, write a check this month. We have to take care of that, make that fund transfer by the end of the month. But I know what you're saying. I don't foresee anything. Like I said, we left some monies in Fund 10. If it doesn't get spent, it would go to fund balance. So it wouldn't be like it's money being left out. But it's not a large sum of money, enough to what we think would cover any potential transfers to food service or special education.
Sure.
So I think it's a safe dollar amount, both from Johnson and Block, speaking to them specifically. Is this a safe dollar amount? And they felt yes.
Okay. I'll make a motion to transfer the $350,000.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, call the question, Mitch.
Second.
Stefan Heisner.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm reviewing. You proposed the motion, she seconded.
I got that part. I was trying to get the wording of the motion down. Okay. So Stefas.
Yes.
Eisner.
Yes.
Janetka.
Yes.
Skelding.
Yes.
Sullivan.
Yes.
Done.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, next is accepting resignation of a professional